let's get you guys introduced first. So first, we have W.R. Miller, or Bob, as we're going to refer to him today. Bob has done the Star Wars historical source books, which is so cool. Now, when I first heard you do these books, I was like, did you canon all of the Star Wars in-book history? And I was like, holy cow, that's thousands of years of history. How did he do it? But then you explained to me very kindly that it's like the history of Star Wars as it exists in this real world, yes?
That's right. I basically documented everything that's been published from 1971 through 1976 in the first volume here, but I'm going to go as far as 1990. So it's loaded with all kinds of behind-the-scenes anecdotes. And there's also foreign coverage in which the stars will say things that are not necessarily that they would share here in the United States. And there's also some exclusive interviews, one with Gary Kurtz. I was very lucky to interview Gary before he passed away, and about a year before he passed away. And he, to my gratitude, endorsed what I was doing. And so there's all kinds of anecdotes, and it was just a labor of love.
So there's so much more Star Wars after 1990. You're not even broaching the prequels yet. Will there be more books later?
No, if I go beyond 1990, I'd go crazy. There's just so much Star Wars out there right now. And so I'm using 1990 as a stopping point because that's when everything started calming down and Lucas was not pushing for the prequels at that point. They were just giving the series a rest.
Okay, that makes sense. Yes, no, it makes sense. I just want to hear more behind-the-scenes stuff with Dave Filoni and Cartoon World. We can get to it later, though. That's okay. Down the line, Mr. William O'Neill, how you doing, sir?
Pleasure to meet you. Pleasure to meet everybody.
You make amazing Star Wars art.
Yes, I'm a freelance writer and illustrator, and an official Lucasfilm illustrator. When they first told me I could say that, I was pretty excited. It's like, wait, what? I'm official? I can, that's great.
Okay, so
Nerd dream come true.
You're doing a lot of original creations then.
Yes, yeah. I've published a bunch of comic book work on my own through Image and CrossGen, my own IPs or intellectual properties, and managed, through the industry through a friend who was already working at Lucasfilm. I was like, hey, I love Star Wars. Can I get in on this? And so he introduced me to an editor, and I ended up doing some work at Topps, and then I got invited to submit artwork for the Star Wars Celebration shows. And I've been doing those for about 10 years now.
Have you done any original ships?
I'm sorry?
Have you designed any original ships?
None that are in the movie. I think like everybody, we all have our own little ships we've designed being an illustrator. I have a design or two in my sketchbook that I was like, that would look really cool in the Star Wars world.
We're going to flip through that sketchbook after this. Questions. Okay, well, let's just start from the top, guys, and tell us when you fell in love with the Star Wars.
I guess I'll go first. Again, I know this ages me, but I saw the original Star Wars A New Hope back in '77. I was a little kid, and I initially didn't want to see it because I was a wimp, and Chewbacca looked scary to me in the commercials. It's like, I don't want to go see it.
Not the character created for the children.
I'm embarrassed by it, but it's...
Hello? There's a door.
There's
4
another
feet
door.
to your right. Hello? They're going to find it. I have to.
Candy Grandma.
Okay, so then you do go to the theater and see the movie, and how are you feeling afterwards?
I was mesmerized. I know I can... One of my...
The fan family kids! Sam is here! Hello! Hi, howdy. Right there, that's where the mic is. That's how that's going to work. Hey, and now our panel is complete. So Sam, we were just talking about when we first fell in love with Star Wars. William was regaling us with tales of how early Chewie was a little scary to very young him. But he did get to the theater, and he saw it, and then what happened?
The next day I was drawing X-Wings and TIE Fighters on lined notebook paper. It was just like my life just went like that. And it was like, and haven't been the same ever since.
Were you a fan of like sci-fi fantasy before? Or was this like really your introduction to the genre as a whole?
It was an introduction to it, and I know there's like different kind of fans. It's like some fans are just into Star Wars, and then there's fans who like, because of Star Wars, we say they're interested in all science fiction. And I'm that one. I'm into all of it now because of Star Wars.
I love it, I love it. Bob,
Yes.
when did you fall in love with Star Wars?
Well, I was first interested, I first heard about it through the Comics Buyer's Guide back in 1976. And reading about it, it sounded like a very exciting project. They're talking about a used universe, which was at the time unique, except for the movie Dark Star, which had these dirty spaceships. But that was unique, and it sounded as if George Lucas knew what he was doing. And the people writing that were very excited, and they were referring to it at the time as the great white hope of science fiction, because a lot of the science fiction movies at the time were dark and depressing and filled with anti-heroes and villains and that kind of thing. And it's like, no, George wanted something upbeat and fresh. And Star Trek just couldn't get, as a feature or as a continued series, just couldn't get its feet off the ground.
I had never considered the idea of it being sort of a bright light, and now that New Hope, like the kind of famous poster where it's just the white light and then in silhouette, makes a lot more sense just from a marketing and visual standpoint. That's really interesting. Sam, hi, welcome.
Excuse me for eating. I literally had 5 minutes to eat my lunch between signing this. So I was like, oh, let's go.
This is panel number 3 for me. I feel your pain, sir.
Is it? So you're starving, huh?
We are
Do you want some
holding
Doritos?
on by a thread. Okay, thank you though. Tell me about when you first fell in love with Star Wars.
Well, I was, at the time, 32 years old. And, no, I'm kidding. I was negative 5 months old. That's right, negative 5 months. And so I was born into it. I didn't really have a choice. I grew up quoting the films and never knew a time before Star Wars. And then I suppose when I got to be about 10 or 11 years old, it became an active choice, because by the time that I was 10 or 11, it would have been after Return of the Jedi, and Star Wars was kind of gone. They weren't making any new movies, and the Droids Ewoks Adventure Hour was gone. And
You only could get it in novel form.
you could only read the Droids Ewoks novels. You're right. No, there weren't any Star Wars novels. I mean, there was like the whole Star's End thing and but those weren't really. I didn't really even know about those. But friends of mine and myself, we liked playing D&D, and we heard that there was like, I can't remember, I must have been 11 or 12 or something like that. There was like a D&D version of Star Wars, or Star Wars version of D&D rather. And yeah, I'm like, what? Cool. So went and picked up those books, the Star Wars role-playing game books by West End Games, and started reading like, wait a second, the Emperor's name is Palpatine? What? And he was a senator, and there was a republic with 10,000 Jedi Knights, and I started going, whoa, let me watch these movies again. And started really digging in a very voluntary way, and then got lost in Star Wars, never to return.
I feel like this is such a cyclical story. Star Wars is so great. We're essentially on our 5th generation of Star Wars fans now. If we think about who's entering and coming up, there'll be a lot of kids who this new trilogy is their first introduction into the series. I grew up watching the originals, was 10 when the prequels came out, and I enjoyed them, particularly Phantom Menace because race car driving is awesome, and it's in the desert and it's a cool kid or whatever. But it was not until the Clone Wars came out where I was just, the television animated show, where I was just completely floored and enraptured with the series, and I was like, there are badass women. Leia is so freaking cool. She has to hold a gun, they give her pants eventually, but then I learned about Ahsoka, and I was like, I don't know if I can contain, like, seeing myself in a character of Star Wars for the first time, really. It was beautiful, and I think that's kind of what makes Star Wars so great, is that we have, like, at this point, hundreds, maybe 1,000 characters. that everyone can kind of imprint themselves on or see themselves in. And I was wondering which characters and or themes from Star Wars kind of initially grabbed at your heart. That's what the whole table.
Go for it, guys.
Okay, I'll give you a bizarre answer to that. The character I latched onto was
Ben Quaterneros.
Dead Greedo. I was dead inside. So I
Wait,
related.
seriously?
No, I'm kidding.
Okay, that'd be amazing. I'm like, dude, stick with that. That's all.
And scene. Actually, bizarrely enough, was an action figure. I liked the Death Star Trooper action figure.
Okay.
Because I would use him as my avatar as me. And so I would then get to interact with Han and Luke and Leia.
You were working on the Death Star?
Well, you know.
You know what that thing's built for, though, right? Like, you know, it's like...
Well, I'd use him as more of I'd use him as sort of like a rebel trooper. 'Cause they were actually going to repaint that action figure as a
Right.
rebel, but they never got around to it. So,
You were
Like
the
Red
early
Right,
Poe.
Well, he's working for you, you're the emperor.
So bizarrely, I guess in
That's
some
true.
sort of way, that was one of the characters I latched on to. I just inserted myself into the universe through that character.
Star Wars is also one of the first series that really took advantage of toy lines as a way to connect to its fan base too. And like I said, so the cartoon were sort of my way in. It's really cool to hear that the toys were sort of your way into the series. It's so much fun. Bob, how about you? Themes and or characters that really, attach themselves to your heart.
Well, no one specifically, when I started with the first Star Wars movie, I liked it as a whole ensemble. If you, the characters have to interact with each other. And I guess the most character I would most likely to be with would be, well, Han Solo and Chewbacca. Because they're a team, and Chewie is Han Solo's conscience. And was instrumental in probably changing Han's mind to go back to rescue Luke at the Death Star.
Those guys are pretty great too. I love them lots. Sam, which characters and or themes?
Luke, and the maybe the if being a Jedi is synonymous with becoming a complete moral adult, then yeah, Luke is the character, because there's not a character who had to work harder for that in all of Star Wars, who had to fall down and scrape his knee, get back up.
Stand on his head.
Yeah, stand on his head, levitate, pebbles. No, but because, with all respect to the other characters, I mean, there's a lot of characters that people venerate and they talk about. Wow, this character is more powerful than Luke. Darth Maul can fight with swords better and all this stuff, and you'd be like, that has nothing to do with why Luke is the greatest Jedi ever. It's because he's the compassionate one. The compassion is his superpower. He doesn't defeat the Emperor through pulling down a Star Destroyer out of his head or doing some weird, lightning or some incredible force thing. He defeats the Emperor because he makes a moral decision. And he throws his lightsaber away and goes, I'm sorry, I'm a better person than this. I'm not doing this. And he doesn't play the Emperor's game. And so Luke, to start as this nerdy kid who wants to go to the Tashi station, to go through his trials and his failures in The Empire Strikes Back, and then to come out the other end on Return of the Jedi as a complete adult. An adult who, by the way, in the previous movie, he's doing a terrible job. He's ignoring the wisdom of his elders and learns from that, and then learns that by the time that he becomes an adult in the next movie, he must now reject those same elders who are still giving him advice. They're like, you didn't listen to us last time. Look what happened. You went to save your friends. We told you not to, and then they had to save you. He's like, yeah. So we're telling you got to kill Darth Vader. He's like, no. Well, we've already tried it. He's gone. I'm not going to do that. That's why Luke's my hero. That's my guy. There he is.
Sam, that's such a beautiful answer. Okay, so I'm going to start tapping into your guys' expertise. I'm going to ask you some fun questions. Starting with William. Okay, so we talked a little bit before about designing ships. You've designed some. They haven't made it to the films yet. But I want to ask you, how would you, do you want to ask how you would improve a ship? Or like what, I guess the question is more like, what do you want to see in a ship on Star Wars that you haven't seen before?
That's a good question. I don't know if I have a good answer for that. I can give you a backhanded criticism.
Do it.
Okay, I will do it. For the prequels, I was always disappointed with the Queen's ship.
Ooh.
That it never got a name.
First of all, yes.
I feel that it was, as I enjoyed the prequels, but I think we're all willing to admit that there's some faults to them.
I was about to throw down though when I thought you were going to criticize the design because I'm like,
No,
that is an amazing
no, I
design.
love the design, but
Yeah.
I think it sort of shows the difference between the prequels and the original trilogies. The original Millennium Falcon, which is a very user-friendly ship. It's got a name. It means a lot to its owner. And then the Queen's ship doesn't even get a name. You know, so I feel I feel they could have personalized it even within the concept of the royalty or something like that. This is a ship that's been passed on through generations of important people from Naboo, and this is an important craft, and it would have added an element of personality to it, which would have made it a little less distant and dry. And I think in some subtle way, from a creator point of view, that sums up the differences between the two trilogies.
That is an amazing observation, and it absolutely houses not just the Queen, but like all of her consort ladies.
Yes.
And the idea of it sort of being like a floating school for girls, like learning and coming to their own, and but like not just like learning to lead people. I never really thought about how that ship is filmed and how we kind of didn't give it its due.
And then it's gone in the second and the third one. It's like I would have brought it back for the other two, and it made it much more, a little more personal.
I love that.
Even from a royalty point of view, it still would have been more intimate.
Now, Sam, your favorite Star Wars hero is Luke, and then you fight his master, and like really, so many times over many, many years, but then in this epic kind of samurai battle.
You started it. You started it.
I want to talk to you, the thing I've been most excited to talk to you about is Darth Maul's journey could maybe, possibly be considered one of the greatest journeys in the Star Wars canon. From being just completely destroyed to literally building himself back up. When you were talking about Luke, it surprised me how close their stories are, and it's really just a difference in who they fight for. Did you ever think you would be playing a character from the dark side? And what does Maul sort of mean to you?
He's not a very nice guy. You know that, right? He's
Not at all.
Well, at first it was simply, I feel like it was a treading water maneuver. Because we're talking about a character that was already accepted and loved by the fans. And by the time that I was asked to step in there and do the voice and help create a persona for this guy, it was like, well, people already love him. You can almost only lose, because to everyone, Darth Maul had whatever personality they wanted him to have. So how the hell were we going to create a personality that would make everyone happy? And somehow we seem to have gotten away with it. So that's it. Yeah, I'm just happy that we survived it. But in terms of his journey, I feel like I'm still learning about it, because we got some new stuff coming up where he's doing some very different things that we've ever seen him try to do. But he's, if Star Wars is about, like I said, the whole ascent to becoming a complete and moral adult, Maul is a guy who maybe isn't going to get there because he's trapped in his own cycle. He's trapped in this circle of obsession, and he is not reflective enough to kind of break out of that. And so I think he's the example that, the opposite example from Luke. Luke is the example of someone who has to be reflective in order to grow, and Maul is too busy blaming everyone else for his problems. So I think that's maybe the way that they're different.
Does he think he's a hero to himself?
Maul?
Like a good character wise is like a character. Everybody thinks they're the hero in their own story. Does he think he's the hero in his story?
In these news episodes? Yeah. You better believe it. I can't tell you what's in those episodes, but oh yes, more than ever does he think he's the hero of his own story.
You're talking about episodes of time.
The episodes that you guys haven't seen.
Yes! Keep these things in here. So excited to see Maul's return. I was shocked to see him in Solo, just pop it up, ready to sling a blade again. He's phenomenal. I think the villains are a huge reason why a lot of us came into Star Wars. As great as it is to see heroes succeed and have these like crazy adventures, my gosh, I can't, there's very few series, fandoms, whatever you want to call them, that have villains that are this deep, that are this intriguing, that are this sympathetic. Bob, I wanted to ask you, as you're doing research for your books, as you're learning about the original villain, Palpatine, what were maybe some of the fun things you learned about him that are not maybe known to the general audiences?
Well, off the top of my head, not even Coruscant was named until after the movies. It was thanks to Timothy Zahn, who authored the Thrawn trilogy, the original Thrawn trilogy.
Great human being.
Yeah.
I love Timothy, he's really sweet.
Palpatine was originally, actually, if you look at the original Star Wars, you'll recall the line from Moff Tarkin. He's talking to Vader, he says, "You, my friend, are the last of their religion." So at that point in time, Vader was the only one who wielded the Force aside from Luke and then Kenobi. So as Lucas developed the story into sequels, at that point, that's when Palpatine came to be a Force wielder and significant in what Lucas had in mind. And that's what I found that was interesting. Lucas was basically making it up as he was going along. He did not know that the first film was going to be that successful.
Vader died, didn't he?
No.
Oh, no. In the original script, he did. And Lucas
Oh.
decided to keep him alive because he's like, oh, this is kind of working. This character's working.
At the end, I'm sorry, let's rewind. At the end of A New Hope, did
At
Vader
the
die
end
in
of
the
New
original
Hope, he
script?
said, add a shot where Vader is spinning off into the distance.
Well, I'm just going off the movie.
Oh, yeah, no.
Yeah.
He lives in the movie.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm talking about.
This is fast. I had no idea that we almost didn't get an Anakin. That is wild.
With Maul dying in episode 1, that it just wasn't, Lucas wasn't thinking in terms of, oh, he's the Vader of he wasn't thinking that way, because Vader was a villain of the week. Like the same way you go to the movie serials and you see the dastardly villain, oh, he gets defeated, he's gone. Next villain next week. You
Yeah,
know?
Vader was
Lucas had all-
basically disposable.
Yeah, Lucas had all these ideas that, like, he's kind of engaged in a little revisionist history, which is cool, I get it. Where he had all these ideas, but he also knew he could not fit them all in one movie. So he did, when he finally managed to get the screenplay done for the first one, he did write it as like a standalone film. If it does well, fantastic, but it's like, so these other ideas I have, well, I'm gonna have to tweak them so they can fit into this one movie, and so.
I used to teach film kids how to use social media and things, and we, found a common ground in Star Wars. And I would tell them that, like, listen, we can look at George Lucas as a prime example of having many great ideas, but being open to edits, being open to our creative crews around us. George did such a wonderful job in establishing an amazing universe, and he had just, who else but him could have, brought this into the world? But then, and again, as we think of Star Wars as something not just the movies, not just the novels, not just the toys, not just the cartoon series, but also the fan fiction, but also our headcanons. I think it's a community of people who've made something truly beautiful, and a huge universe that we can spend so much time in. And I wonder, do you guys have a favorite place to spend time in Star Wars? And that, I mean, either a book or a movie, or even like a scene. Like, for the prequels, I really like it when Anakin and Padme are just in love, and I can just chop around it and be like, no, this is just like a peaceful, beautiful place where these people were happy.
She shouldn't be dating him.
She should. No. It's weird all the way around. Their ages don't kind of
She's such an
questions.
Such an enabler.
For me, it's the flight scenes.
Ooh.
Because see, look, the flight scenes in the original trilogy, George Lucas is into speed. He's into racing, and so the Death Star trench when the X-wings are diving in, and you get that exhilarating perspective. You know, you are a part of that scene. You are in that X-wing, and everything's rushing past you, and all the lasers are flashing toward you, and Darth Vader's zooming in on your back. You know, that's very exciting. And you've got to blow up the Death Star very soon, or they're going to blow up the Yavin 4. You know, in Empire Strikes Back, you've got the snowspeeder scene where they're looking for Han Solo, and George wisely made that sort of, in a way, interactive. You know, you've got the over-the-shoulder shots of the pilots as they're going over the snowbanks, and the camera's going up and down over the mountains, and then in Return of the Jedi, the speeder bike scene. You know, exhilarating. Those are the moments that I look forward to.
Definitely. Sam?
Anything to do with the Force.
Oh, the magic stuff, yeah.
Yeah, the magic stuff. I mean, everything in the, everything from Luke Dagobah to Ben Kenobi even talking about the Force in the original film to Bendu in Star Wars Rebels. And just like, there's, I love that stuff.
That's my next tattoo. I'm really excited to get it. I'm obsessed with Bendu. Great Jedi's forever. So let me just drop a fan favorite bomb then. How do you feel about the midichlorians? Did that at all take away from the magical experience, if that's your favorite aspect of it? Or did it add
For
to
me?
it? Yeah.
No, because I knew that he wasn't saying the midichlorians were the Force. The Force is still the Force. You know, the idea that the Force is, that the Jedi are one group of practitioners that have learned to use certain aspects of the Force. But, you know, when working on the Clone Wars, it was really rewarding to watch the prequels and go, I think George is saying that the Jedi are not the be-all, end-all of how this works. Like, they're great. It's at heart a very good organization, but they're one organization and there's more to it, and they're trying to learn about this Force thing. And then in talking with Dave in the Clone Wars episodes that explored that, where George further explored that he makes it explicit that there are things about the Force that the Jedi are not privy to just yet. So I thought there were, you know, when you take it as everything together, I think there's plenty of mystery left to what that is.
All right, guys, I'm going to ask them one more question, and then I'm going to open it to Q&A, so be thinking about what you want to ask, and I'm just going to kindly remind everybody we're asking questions, okay? No stories. Cool. So you guys have all been fans for decades. Years and years of your lives invested in this incredible series. Now that you're actively a part of either telling the history or creating new characters or designing and drawing aspects of it, what responsibility do you feel you have as a creator to the series and to the fandom?
Wow.
Well, if you're asking me, the books that I'm writing here, they're in tribute to the filmmakers, everybody that was involved. I'm not talking about just George Lucas's vision. I'm talking about everybody's vision, everything that I can find that's been published, either put online or in my research trips to Rancho Obi-Wan or Skywalker Ranch or the main library at Cambridge. I've gathered all these stories, and it's basically a tribute to the filmmakers, credit where it's due. It's my honor to do that.
I just, when my artwork, I'm always just trying to capture the excitement and energy that I felt the first time I saw Star Wars, and it was just, if I could use the word romantic, you know, it's an
You
old
can.
school romantic, you know, adventure that just still warms my heart, you know, I just love it.
Yeah.
To say the lines they put in front of me. Well, no, I mean, I feel like anything that, just serving to the best of my understanding what George's beliefs were when it came to this story, what George's take was. It's not widely known that Clone Wars was George's show and that he was there, like, guiding the whole thing and saying, you know,
Now we're doing a story about poison tea on Mandalore. And now there's Force wizards. There's witches on the planet.
Can we call him Dathomir?
Sure, whatever.
Can you just do the rest of this in George's voice?
Yeah, sure.
If I have any function, it's simply in serving that mythology, to the best of my understanding of what it is that George would have wanted, and trying to make it as little about me as possible, because making it too much about oneself is the path to the dark side.
Thank you guys so much. I'm going to open it up and ask you guys to use your theater voices, project to the back so we can hear you. I see a lightsaber up. What's up, guy?
Question for Sam. Two questions, actually. Will we ever see the brother, sister, and father again? Maybe in the Clone Wars?
The Mortis characters from the Mortis episodes? Well, you saw them in Rebels. Isn't that enough?
No! We need more!
I'm going to answer your question with a question. If I knew, would I tell you?
And my other question was, if they ever bring Star Killer to the theaters, I hope they do, we want like to reprise that role.
I don't know if I'm available, man. I don't know if I can do it. I don't have time. I would surely love to do anything that they'd ask me to do. But the Mortis thing, again, it's talking about mystery to the Force. When George Lucas came up with those stories, everyone was like, what are we doing? What are we doing? What did George say we were doing?
Yeah, there's a father, there's a son, and there's a daughter, and if you don't get on board, you're fired.
He didn't say that.
But he would have been right because they're the best. Who else? Questions? Sir?
I have a question for all you. Would they ever do a more backstory on Boba Fett or IG-88, some of the bounty hunters?
The question for those who maybe couldn't hear was, would there be more stories on the bounty hunters?
Like more in depth. Like
More in
scenes,
depth?
Yeah.
Okay.
I don't know if they are. I would love it if they would, because one of my favorite scenes in Empire is just seeing all the bounty hunters, and I would love to. I feel like there's like a lot of drama in between all of them.
Oh yeah,
You know,
big
I
time.
feel like Boba Fett gets all the glory, and some of the other ones are a bit resentful of it. So, it's like you in your fancy armor.
Oh yeah.
I think there are some backstories told in what used to be called the Expanded Universe stories in the comics, the Dark Horse comics, but now it's called Legacy, so you'd have to look at that. But as for IG-88, if you saw the trailer for The Mandalore, you'll see IG-88 in that, and he goes berserk. His body, if you haven't seen it, his body is like a praying mantis kind of, he's like, or a pretzel, he's staying straightened up. His head is rigid, while the rest of his body rotates, his arms are out, firing lasers all over the place. It's very exciting.
I don't like it, it's terrifying.
What can I say? But if you're an IG-88 fan, you'll see it in that.
Exactly.
I feel like your previous answer of if I knew, would I tell you applies here. So I'll just tell you guys that last year at this convention, I sat down with Mr. Tim Zahn and asked him a very similar question, which was if you could pitch one of the independent movies. Rogue One had just come out. We were discussing, if you could pitch just a movie in the Star Wars universe, which story would you want to tell? And he said he wanted to do a feature-length story of Han being trapped in the carbonite and all of the bounty hunters coming to steal Han so they could win the prize over. Tim is amazing. He's brilliant. Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
My question is for Sam. So there's heroes, there's villains. Pretty much what draws you to. It seems like you play a lot of villain roles in general, voicing, acting. The dark villains. What do you like about it the most? Getting into character.
What do I like about villains the most?
Yes, play one, getting into the character, and just.
I think the biggest challenge with villains is to try to make the audience agree with them, because they're not nice.
No.
But I mean, when people say I feel so bad for Darth Maul, and I'm like, I feel bad for the kids on that planet. I was telling to say, Savage, here's how we do things. See those kids over there? Yes. Yeah, well, we're going to kill them, and that's going to get the Jedi to come in. I feel bad for those kids.
Do you ever feel bad that like you're gonna just terrify like little kids, and as they get older, they're just never gonna look at you the same when they realize when they look at you and see, oh, this is the guy that's the voice behind that?
So she's telling me, do you feel bad for the kids that you're traumatizing? Something along those lines. That's what you just said. Yeah, now I do. Now that you're telling me. Yeah.
I mean, you have the face of like, oh, the nice guy, but you play the dark.
Really? Because I think the reason I get all the villain roles is this poor acting that's attached to the top of my face.
No. I mean, you could do hero, villain, it doesn't matter, but I mean, you're great at the darker roles, so. I just worry for little kids.
You're just worrying for the children? Is that what you're saying? The whole question, guys, was for the benefit of the children. Just think of the children.
Look, the whole thing with the villain, with any villain role is I think if there's a challenge to it, is again, trying to make the stuff sound as reasonable as possible. And when your face is red with tattoos and there's horns coming out of your face, it's an even bigger challenge to make what comes out of his mouth sound reasonable. But I'm weirdly, strangely delighted that people feel bad for Maul or any of these not so nice characters. Because they sure feel bad for themselves.
You're
Let me
doing
tell
such a
you.
good job that I feel like you've made him oddly like he's just like it's oddly relatable now. It's like he's somebody who's just like fallen into a bad crowd, made some bad decisions.
Go
like,
get coffee
he
with him.
Like life had been different. He could have been a
Sam,
good guy.
Sam, I'd like to throw a compliment your way. When you were on Once Upon a Time, you were playing Mr. Hyde, and Mr. Gold was force choking you, and you had your head back and you're choking, but at the same time laughing. And that was, to me, was amazing.
Thank you, yeah. Yeah, well, I remember that one.
Yeah,
Yeah, well, yeah,
that was amazing.
Thank you very much. That was another character where it was fun to try to make people feel bad for him. So, but you know that's the thing. The villain never thinks they're the villain unless it's Palpatine. I think he probably knows it, doesn't care. He's like, that's great. I'm the villain. This is amazing.
Ooh, I know what I want to ask you guys. As fans, for Star Wars Celebration, they released the new trailer. If you guys follow me on IG, there's a video of me weeping hysterically at it. It was maybe the most beautiful trailer in the history of Star Wars. Stunning, shocking, thrilling, that end. How did you guys hear when you heard Palpatine's voice? Just as fans, like not even as creators or part of the Star Wars universe.
I was excited by the opportunity for what this might bring from a storytelling perspective. Absolutely.
Yes.
I always, I can't answer. I always know a little bit more than I should.
Okay.
So it wasn't as surprising to me.
Sam's cool, guys.
That's not, I'm sorry. Here's the thing, I don't really know much about what's happening in that, but that was something that I was aware of.
I need to answer all my questions like that. Make me sound more important. I
No,
know
I'm
things.
not
I know the things I know.
No, because the real reason I'm like hesitant to say that is because people tell me things they shouldn't, and I'm going to get people in trouble. That's basically it. Like, why does Witwer know this? This is stupid.
The burden of being in the industry is very real, guys. How about you, as a fan, you hear Palpatine?
Well, it really alters what happened at the end of Return of the Jedi, doesn't it? You know, was Darth Vader's sacrifice worth it? But I can only speculate. Maybe it will work. I mean, I'm happy that Ian McDiarmid is going to be involved. He's a wonderful actor, so we'll give the filmmakers a chance. Let's see how they make it work. I'm looking forward to it.
Me too, it's an adventure. More questions from the audience. You, sir.